Everyone, or good morning, or whatever time it is where you are. I'm Amanda Vermillion. I'm the owner of the Tea Mistress LLC and the director of the Lone Star Houston Tea Festival. And I am really happy to be here tonight. It's 10 o'clock in the evening where I am here in Houston, Texas, USA. And I guess there are people from all around the world. Maybe it's the middle of the day for you. We are in the middle of it's hurricane season here, and there's actually a hurricane a few hundred miles south of us called Hurricane Hannah. And right here, it's just rainy and windy where I am, but there's a possibility my power might get knocked off and I might get kicked off the internet. So let's hope that doesn't happen, okay? My talk is called The Real Scoop on Iced Tea. And I apologize in advance if it's very US centric, but that's normally who my audience is when I speak. I've included some international information at the end and looking forward to interacting with everybody afterwards. So here goes. So there is a very common, I guess, historical, I'm putting fact in quotes with my fingers, which you can't see, but we have been told that iced tea was invented at the 1904 World's Fair in St. Louis, Missouri in the USA. This is written on a lot of websites and a lot of tea books and stuff like that. So we're going to explore that story right now and find out the history behind that. Now, or was it? Let's find out. So the story of iced tea that you'll see, you may have actually seen this story on different tea websites or in some tea books or magazines, but the story is that iced tea was invented at the 1904 World's Fair. There was a merchant named Richard Bleckenden. I assume it's pronounced Bleckenden, it might be Bletchinden. He was a tea plantation owner in India. He tried to give away free samples of his hot tea to the fair visitors, but it was very, very hot that summer in St. Louis, and the visitors did not seem interested in drinking hot tea while they were walking around outside. So out of desperation, he dumped some ice into his tea, and this became an instant hit at the fair. Now, what really happened? Research tells another story. So let's go back to the roots of iced tea in the USA. In the 19th century, a lot of people were drinking punch. Punches were very popular, a mixed drink that was thrown into a big bowl and scooped out. And some of the punches, many of the punches included tea. Almost all of them included alcohol. Not all, but many. Usually these were made with cold green tea, and they were heavily spiked with whatever liquor was available. It was kind of whatever you had lying around in the house is what went into that punch. This was also a thing in England, not just in America, but they had certain ones in England that were very well known at the time. There was the Regent's Punch, which was named after King George V, who was the Prince Regent before he was King of England. And the American versions, there are some famous ones called St. Cecilia Punch that was very popular in Charleston, South Carolina. And there was one in Savannah, Georgia called the Chatham Artillery Punch. And interestingly enough, I did this talk on June 10th, and one of my attendees had been to Savannah, Georgia, and had actually had a recreation of that punch. And she actually sent me these two slides here from some information that she had from when she went there. So there's a recipe here. I'm going to zoom this with my fingers so you can see it a little better. So all kinds of stuff are in here. There's wine, rum, gin, brandy, and Benedictine. So that's 4 kinds of alcohol already. Then some maraschino cherries. I don't know if they had those back in the 18th century, but this is what this place is doing. And then some rye whiskey, so we have some more alcohol. Then 1.5 gallons of strong tea. I guess it could be any kind of tea you had around at the time. Brown sugar, orange juice, and lemon juice. And then mix for 36 to 48 hours. And then add champagne right before so that it's nice and bubbly. So I imagine that was probably very, very strong and intoxicating. So this is one of the earliest written recipes that was found in a cookbook in the United States. This was a recipe from 1839, a recipe for tea punch. The cookbook was called The Kentucky Housewife by Mrs. Lettice Brianon. And this is a sort of a typical recipe for an American tea punch. She says, make 1.5 pints of very strong tea in the usual manner. Now, she doesn't say what the usual manner is, so I guess the assumption was that everybody knew how to make tea at that time. Strain it and pour it boiling hot on 1 pound and 1/4 of loaf sugar. So I'm guessing a loaf sugar was like a big piece of hardened sugar, maybe like a sugar cone that was unprocessed. That measures up to 2.5 cups of white sugar. So for those of you in metric, I'm looking at my conversion measuring cup to tell you exactly how much that is. I believe that is about 600 milliliters of sugar. So this was a lot of sugar. Add a 1/2 pint of rich sweet cream, and then stir in gradually a bottle of claret, which is a wine, or of champagne. You may heat it to the boiling point and serve it so, or you may send it round entirely cold in glass cups. So this is a very alcoholic, very sweet tea punch. Now, in the 19th century, well, obviously, before there was refrigeration, before we had refrigerators, there were ice boxes. And before there were ice boxes, there was really no way to keep your food cold in the summer. Maybe you had a grain cellar that you dug in the ground, and then it would stay sort of cooler around the temperature of the earth. But what started to happen in the early 19th century in the USA was that ice entrepreneurs from the northern US states started shipping ice down it was colder up in their area for a lot longer. And they started shipping down ice to the southern United States and to the Caribbean. Americans were dominating the 19th century global ice trade at that time. So this really was a game changer, because now you had a way to keep your food cold during the summer. Now, in the second half of the 19th century, tea planting began. Well, tea was already growing in India, but tea cultivation commercially started taking off in India and Ceylon because of the British. And also countries in Africa that were under British rule or control at the time were also started producing tea. And the price of tea dropped at that time because of the availability of these different types of tea. Before that, it was pretty much all the tea was coming out of China that was being sold commercially in the rest of the world. Now, most of the new teas coming out of India, Ceylon, which is now called Sri Lanka, and these African countries were black teas. So that became a cheaper, a more economical choice. The green tea was still relatively expensive. Now, 1879, this is the oldest sweet tea recipe in print. Now, a sweet tea would be an iced tea with sugar added. This is from a cookbook called Housekeeping in Old Virginia by Marion Cabell Tyree. And she says iced tea, now she spells it ice, not iced with a D. After scalding the teapot, put into it 1 quart, which is about a liter, of boiling water and 2 teaspoonfuls of green tea. If wanted for supper, do this at breakfast. So what that means is they were letting this tea steep, this green tea steep, for probably 8 to 10 hours. Can you imagine how astringent and bitter and oversteeped it would have been? At dinner time, strain without stirring through a tea strainer into a pitcher. Let it stand until tea time and pour into decanters, leaving the sediment at the bottom of the pitcher. Ooh. I don't know about that. Fill the goblets with ice, put 2 teaspoons full granulated sugar in each, and pour the tea over the ice and sugar. A squeeze of lemon will make this delicious and healthful, as it will correct the astringent tendency from, no doubt, leaving it steeping for 8 to 10 hours. Now, 1884, here's the first iced tea recipe in print using black tea instead of green. And this was from Mrs. Lincoln's Boston cookbook, What to Do and What Not to Do in Cooking. And this woman, Mary Lincoln, was the director of the Boston Cooking School. So Boston is in Massachusetts, which is in the northern United States. And this sort of is interesting because there's a stereotype here in the USA that iced tea is a southern United States thing, and that people in the north don't drink it. So here we have evidence that at least in the 1800s, it was being made and consumed in Boston, Massachusetts, in the north. So page 112, iced tea, again without the D, or Russian tea for some reason. Make the tea by the first receipt, and I'm not quite sure exactly what that means. Strain it from the grounds and keep it cool. When ready to serve, put 2 cubes of block sugar, I'm guessing that's sugar cubes, in a glass, half fill with broken ice, add a slice of lemon, and fill the glass with cold tea. Now, here is a news article from 1890 in a newspaper that was called the Nevada Noticer. Now, this is not the state of Nevada. This is a city in the state of Missouri called Nevada. So this was Nevada, Missouri. And this was a state reunion of ex-Confederate veterans. These were veterans of the American Civil War who fought on the southern side. And the reunion was held at Camp Jackson, and it lists a whole bunch of things that were consumed at this reunion, because apparently these veterans were big eaters and drinkers, and it mentions 880 gallons of iced tea. Now, it's just listed matter-of-factly with all the other foods and drinks, which clearly shows that, there's no explanation. Well, they drank 880 gallons of iced tea, which is this cold tea served on ice. Clearly, the way it's written, it was assumed that the average reader knew what iced tea was. And you might also notice that they drank 2,220 gallons of coffee. So I guess that's showing that coffee at this point was still more popular, although iced tea was well known. Now we come to the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. And there are records from this World's Fair showing that a concessionaire, we don't know which one because they're unnamed, grossed over $2,000 selling iced tea and lemonade. And the Home Queen World's Fair souvenir cookbook includes a recipe for variations on serving iced tea. And our friend Richard Bleckenden, who figured in that 1904 World's Fair story, was listed as an official concessionaire at this World's Fair as well. Licensed to serve, or I guess registered to serve tea in cups and packages at this event as well. So here we have evidence that iced tea was already at the Chicago World's Fair several years before the one in St. Louis. Now, here's another published iced tea recipe. This one comes from the Enterprising Manufacturing Company of Pennsylvania. So again, this is in the northern United States, not the South. The recipe booklet was called the Enterprising Housekeeper. And this was apparently a booklet that you would get if you went to this manufacturing company and bought an appliance from them, and you would get this booklet for free with your appliance. So they advertised some ice shredders that they were selling and the many uses of the ice shredder. And one of the use mentioned in the booklet is for your iced tea. Now here's iced spelled with a D on the end. And this is now the second reference to iced tea in a Yankee cookbook, which are the people from the northern US. And again, no description or explanation of what iced tea is, just listed matter-of-factly as something that people obviously knew what it was. Now we come to the 1904 World's Fair. So what was the real story? Since obviously we have evidence that that previous story was not true. Now, here is our friend Richard Bleckenden, who was the India Tea Commissioner and the director of the East Indian Pavilion at the fair. He was indeed offering hot tea to everybody, and it was too hot, so people were not drinking it. So what did he do? He and his staff took the brewed tea from India, and they filled several large bottles with this tea, and then they placed them on stands upside down, allowing the tea to flow through some iced lead pipes. This free iced tea, so it became chilled while being poured through the pipes, and this free iced tea was very much welcomed by the thirsty fairgoers. Now, after the fair, Richard took this lead pipe apparatus to New York City, and he was doing demonstrations inside of the Bloomingdale's department store. At the time, it was just called Bloomingdale Brothers, and he was offering this free iced tea to the shoppers, demonstrating that iced tea could be a desirable summertime drink. So what I'm guessing happened is that somehow the story got changed a little bit, where he got credited with inventing iced tea, but really what he did is he invented some sort of a lead pipe gadget, which we all know that drinking lead is not good for you, or drinking lead-laced water is not good for you. We know that now, so it's probably a really good thing that this device did not become a hit everywhere. So here's some other evidence that tea was everywhere at the 1904 World's Fair. Both hot tea and iced tea were on most of the restaurant menus from the World's Fair that were retained or that are archived from then. Several of the restaurants there mentioned iced tea on the menu: the Barbecue Fair Japan, Old Irish Parliament House, the Louisiana and Texas Rice Kitchen, a Pavilion Cafe. So it's very unlikely that all of these restaurants would have seen cold tea suddenly being invented at the East India Pavilion and then having them rush to a printer to have their menus reprinted. This was before there was 24-hour Kinko's copy, FedEx printing places everywhere. It would have been very painstaking to get menus reprinted, so highly unlikely that that's what happened. So now that we have solved the mystery of the invention, quote unquote, of iced tea in the United States and when it dates back to, we're going to move along to the 20th century. After the World's Fair, what was going on with iced tea then? So by the end of World War I, around 1917, when the war was last year of the war, Americans were buying special tall iced tea glasses, long spoons, and lemon forks. And here you have a picture of some different ones, some sterling silver plated ones that are actually old ones from probably back then, and then some modern pictures here. So by the 1930s, people were commonly referring to the tall goblet in crystal glass sets as an iced tea glass. So this became a standard thing that many people had in their homes. Now, in the Prohibition era, this is a period of time in the United States where the temperance movement, which were the people who were against alcoholic beverages being consumed, they finally got an amendment passed in the United States to prohibit the sale of alcohol. So this lasted for 13 years, and there was still illegal alcohol being made and sold. It was probably not that easy to find, although depending where you were. So a lot of people turned to iced tea to substitute for their I guess the taste of alcohol, or maybe just a beverage that sort of soothe that craving. So they turned to iced tea, and a lot of recipes started popping up in Southern cookbooks. There was a 1921 cookbook on the coffee, not a cookbook, this was actually a coffee and tea industry book that stated, since Prohibition has gone into effect, tea has been drunk in places not heretofore thought of. And another thing that's not mentioned on this slide is that the dark color of the tea was probably a good way to camouflage any alcohol that you were spiking your drink with. So if you had a little flask of alcohol in your pocket, you could discreetly pour it in that iced tea glass and nobody could really tell what you were drinking besides the tea. Now, by 1928, here's a standard Southern tea recipe that appeared in a cookbook called Southern Cooking. And this was, I guess, a common recipe in a lot of cookbooks, but this one mentions that tea, when it is to be iced, should be made much stronger to allow for the ice used in chilling. And this is something that we still do to this day. A medium strength tea is usually liked. A good blend and grade of black tea is most popular for iced tea, while green and black are used for hot. And she suggests to sweeten the tea for the iced drink, don't put in a whole lot of sugar, but if you do put it in while the tea is hot, also good advice that I would give to anyone. She also says be careful not to make too much tea and sweeten too much of the tea at once, or you'll just be wasting that tea in sugar. And then she says you can serve it with or without a lemon, and she mentions some garnishes: a sprig of mint, a strawberry, a cherry, a slice of orange or pineapple, fresh or canned fruit, and she says do not put milk in iced tea. Now, what happens in World War II? Now, before World War II, still 50% of the tea consumed here in the USA was green tea. During World War II, because of the war, obviously, the major sources of green tea, which were China and Japan, were cut off from the US, which meant that the only tea coming into the USA at the time was from the British-controlled India. So by the end of the war, a lot of Americans had switched to black tea out of necessity, and I guess it became a habit, and it pretty much is still the standard tea here for iced tea, although that is changing. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever seen the movie Steel Magnolias, starring Dolly Parton, but there's a scene in that movie where she calls Southern sweet tea the house wine of the South. Now, as Southern as sweet tea, this is an expression that is kind of popped up here in the US fairly recently, which is interesting. It's sort of a what this writer here, Robert Moss from Serious Eats, calls a Southernization. And he says the way that certain foods come to be associated with a region, they become so powerful and prevalent that many Southerners begin to internalize them as integral parts of their identities. But iced tea did not originate in the South, which we've shown in some of these earlier slides. It first achieved popularity in the North, where it was often sweetened with sugar. So tea was not embraced, iced tea was not embraced by Southerners, and even then adding sugar to it was a personal preference, and it was not a question of regional identity. So here is something that has become a fairly recent stereotype that we are now debunking a lot of stereotypes tonight, I think. Sweet versus unsweet tea by region here in the US. So now at this time, sweet tea is more common in certain southern US states in the Southeast. And apparently it's very popular in Canada, which I just learned recently as well. And then unsweet tea is more popular in the northern US states. And here in Texas, where I live, my husband, who is a native Texan, tells me that it was always served unsweetened. And if you were given, you know, things to add to it, if you wanted to sweeten it yourself, but generally if you went somewhere, you would be asked, do you want sweet or unsweet? Now, on a lighter note, mandatory sweet tea. So we have a holiday here in America, maybe you have it in other countries, called April Fool's Day, where you play jokes on people. And a state representative in the state of Georgia in 2003 introduced a bill proposing to require that all Georgia restaurants that serve tea should be required to serve sweet tea. He said the bill was an attempt to bring humor to the legislature, but he actually wouldn't mind if it became law. And interestingly enough, twice in the last couple of weeks, I was talking to people who told me, matter of factly, oh, did you know that there's a law in Georgia that it's mandatory to serve sweet tea? And I said, actually, that's a joke. It didn't really pass. So apparently that April Fool's Day joke became very serious, and people seem to think it is true, but it actually is not. It is a joke. Now, National Iced Tea Day here in the USA, it is celebrated on June 10th. It started in 2013. Now, this is not an official holiday, but it's, you know, just a fun holiday, I guess, for marketing purposes. And normally many businesses will run specials. They'll give away iced tea or they'll have discounts, stuff like that. This year, because of, unfortunately, the pandemic that's going on, I did not see any specials online before, but normally I'll get up that morning and I'll do a Google search and I'll find news articles stating like Starbucks has free tea or, you know, things like that. This year, not much of that happens really. Now, we're moving along to, since this is an international festival, I wanted to talk a little bit about iced tea and cold tea in other countries. Excuse me while I take a sip. So in South America, yerba mate is a very popular beverage. I believe Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay, as well as Paraguay. Now in Paraguay, they have a traditional way to drink it cold called tereré. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. By the way, please correct me if you're from one of these countries I'm talking about and you know something better than, if I make a mistake, I want you to let me know in the chat afterwards because I can't see the chat right now. Apparently 90% of the population of Paraguay drinks this on a daily basis. As a base, they will use a strong smoky mate and they will drink it out of a guampa, which is a hollowed cow's horn, or else just the general metal gourds that are popular in throughout South America. They will add cold water and ice and maybe some herbs like maybe mint or something like that. And for maximum extraction of nutrients, you can brew it hot and then let it cool if you prefer. And then you can reuse those leaves, the mate leaves, multiple times. Just refill water until you kind of maybe feel that maybe you need to add some more mate. So mate, not to go into too much on this because we're trying to move along here, but it is full of polyphenol, antioxidants. It has bioflavonoids in it, quercetin and rutin. It also It also has theobromine, which is the compound in chocolate that gives you sort of that endorphin buzz. It's also present, I believe, in yaupon, which is related in the same family of plants. It also has saponins, which are anti-inflammatory, and they help regulate the immune system and stimulate the immune system, full of vitamins and minerals. So something to think about if you decide you want to try some cold mate, the tereré. Okay, so Japan. Interestingly enough, there's a cold brew method that originated in Japan. So here we are with the first half of the presentation with Americans claiming that they invented iced tea. And here we have a traditional recipe or a traditional cold brew method of preparing tea from Japan that has been going on for years, centuries as well. So apparently brewing tea with ice is the traditional Japanese way of brewing a high-end sencha or gyokuro. And if you look at some, I believe Golden Moon Tea had a really beautiful pictorial where they show the different photos of the stages of this. I have not tried this myself, but this is on my bucket list of something to do. The cold brew will help a tea be more smooth and not bitter. We'll bring out the subtle flavors a little more. So something to maybe try if you want to try something new, try some ice brewing. And bottled iced tea is very, very popular in Japan. From what I have read, it's one of the biggest iced tea markets in the world as far as bottled iced tea. That's also a big thing here in the United States. I was in Japan in 2010, and I was amazed at how many vending machines there were everywhere, not just here in the USA. There might be a vending machine like inside of a building, like maybe you're at a school or you're like at a big office building or something, a train station. But in Japan, like you could just be walking down the street and there'll be a vending machine in the middle of the street, like not even inside of a store or something like that, and all kinds of things in those vending machines. I got hooked on the royal milk tea when I was there. It's a canned milk tea, really delicious. What I learned recently is that the royal milk tea was actually invented by the Japanese, the Lipton is Japanese headquarters in 1965, and they had a whole list of recipes, and this was a recipe introduced at that time, apparently. Now, iced tea around the world, moving along to Thailand. For those of us in the West, a Thai restaurant might be a place where some of us may have first tried this beverage. I'm drinking some right now, don't mind me. So it would be a black tea with some condensed milk to make it nice and sweet. Now I think food coloring is mostly used, but I believe originally when this tea was made, there would be some tamarind or maybe some orange blossoms, a little anise added. And as I said before, this is very popular in Thai restaurants. This is a picture I took in a Thai restaurant of, this is actually served in a mason jar, which I think looks really pretty. Iced tea around the world. Now we're moving along to Vietnam. A lot of teas I guess there are a lot of popular teas in Vietnam, or herbal teas as well, that can be enjoyed iced. I found a couple of recipes online. The only one of these I've tried is the peach tea. There's a picture on the right of a peach tea that I had at a Vietnamese restaurant here in Houston. Interestingly enough, this is a good use for the syrup at the bottom of the cans. If you have a can of peaches, you can pour that peach syrup into the drink. So instead of pouring it down the drain, it's a great use for that. Vietnamese lime iced tea. This one sounds good. I would like to try this as well. Both of these, I believe, are using black tea, although the lime tea could be either, I think. And then milk tea apparently is also popular in Vietnam as well. I believe that blue pea flower tea is, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Sweet artichoke tea. This is a picture of actually a boba, a bubble tea that I got at a Vietnamese bubble tea place here in the Houston area, and this was an artichoke tea base. So boiling artichokes, normally this is a vegetable that we might eat here in the West, but in Vietnam, the water is used to make a tea as well. It's supposed to be very good for you. Add some rock sugar to that and dissolve it, and then this had some grass jelly in it as well. Really good. I enjoyed that a lot. Hong Kong milk tea, moving along to Hong Kong. So Hong Kong was under British control for quite a while. And the influence of the British Empire drinking the afternoon tea tradition of the black tea with milk added still remains. Now, silk stocking tea is a popular, I guess, a Hong Kong type of tea that Hong Kong is known for, where a strong black tea is used and then condensed or evaporated milk is added and is passed through a tea sock, a strainer made out of cloth. Now, this is enjoyed iced as well. My understanding is that originally after a bottle of Coca-Cola was finished, you would save the bottle and pour the milk tea in there and then put it in the refrigerator to keep it nice and cold. Now, there's some ready-made that's already sold in plastic bottles and cans, and there are restaurants who make their own and people who make their own, and it is not liked when ice cubes are added to it because that will dilute the strength of the tea. So they will either do an ice bath, as in the picture here, where the tea is kept cold, but it's still the original strength that it would be when it was hot, or ice cubes can be made of milk tea and then those ice cubes added to that. Now, this is something I would like to try that I have not tried yet. So moving along to Taiwan, boba tea or bubble tea, tapioca tea, pearl milk tea, all pretty much names for this. It could be the whole range of these types of teas that you drink cold with flavor added and these things, or it could just be the name of the tapioca balls as well. It was originated in Taiwan in the 1980s, and there are two origin stories. So one origin story, hang on, wait, let me look at my notes because this is not on my slide, but there was and forgive me if I pronounce this gentleman's name wrong. Liu Hanqie was serving cold tea at his tea shop in Taichung City, and sometime in the early 80s. And then one day they had a company meeting, and his product manager put some tapioca balls into her iced tea at a staff meeting, and apparently the rest is history. So that was one origin story, but there's another story that there was a tea shop in Tainan called Hanlin Tea Room, and that they claim to have invented this boba tea as well. So who knows which is true? This is going to be another investigation, I guess, that would need to occur. But apparently the name boba is a reference to I guess she was a very sexy Hong Kong actress, I believe, called Amy Yip, and her nickname was Boba, which is a Chinese slang term for her breasts, is my understanding. So a little bit of adult humor there. Now, the tapioca, those of us, here in the US, I grew up with a dessert called tapioca that was like these little white balls with milk added, and it was like sort of like a pudding. And I believe originally this is from the cassava plant, which is a plant that originates in South America. And these are bigger. And the ones that are used in the drinks are soaked in sugar, like a brown sugar or like a syrup, a sugar syrup, so that they turn black. And then they have a chewy consistency, and the texture and the chewy consistency, I guess, is referred to as Q, very similar to the way the Italians might talk about pasta being al dente, a very desirable quality. So the pearls are made with this tapioca starch from the cassava. And originally, they were put on desserts, and there are still sort of frozen shaved ice desserts in Taiwan and in other countries in Asia where they will put these things on top of them. But I guess the drink being put in drinks started in the 1980s, and there were so many different kinds now, kinds with milk, kinds with fruit juice or slushies, and they're not just the black boba. There's like popping boba. Here's a picture of some heart-shaped boba. Here's some kind of a green drink. I don't even know what's in that. My friend ordered it at a restaurant. And rushing through this quickly. Now we're going to move along a little bit and talk about alcoholic beverages with iced tea in them, or with the name iced tea. So we have a famous drink in America called the Arnold Palmer. Arnold Palmer was a very famous professional golfer, and he used to drink this mix of iced tea and lemonade. So it started being called the Arnold Palmer when one time in the 1960s, he was at a golf club in Palm Springs, and he ordered his signature drink, and a woman came up behind him and said, "I'll have that Arnold Palmer drink." And after that, it started to be called an Arnold Palmer. So the way he liked it was 3 parts of unsweetened tea, black tea, to 1 part lemonade. And there's some places that will do half and half tea and lemonade, and that is called a half and half. That's not technically an Arnold Palmer. The company called Arizona Iced Tea has gotten the use of the Arnold Palmer name, and they've been bottling an Arnold Palmer iced tea since 2001. Now, if you add vodka to this combination, that's called a John Daly. The Miller Coors company here, big beer company here in the U.S., uses that recipe, but they call it an Arnold Palmer spiked. Spiked is slang for adding alcohol to your tea. Now, there's a popular drink called the Long Island iced tea, which interestingly enough actually has no iced tea in it. The story was that this was invented by a bartender in Jones Beach in Babylon, New York. This is called Long Island. It's a region of New York that is pretty much all coastal, so a lot of beach bars and beach nightclubs and restaurants. A lot of people go there to have fun. So there was a cocktail contest that had to include the ingredient triple sec alcoholic beverage. He won the contest, and this became the house drink at the bar where he worked. Of course, every other bar on Long Island started copying this recipe, and this became a really popular drink all over the United States in the 1980s. It's a combination of 5 different alcohols with a splash of Coca-Cola. There's no tea in it at all, but it looks and tastes like iced tea. Now, here's this is his recipe. There's a website, it's liicedtea.com, where you can pull this recipe out yourself. It's an archived website that used to belong to this bartender before he passed away. And now there are other origin stories for this beverage as well. One story is that it was invented by housewives who would dip into the husband's the family liquor cabinet when the husbands were at work, and take a little bit of each type of alcohol so that the husband wouldn't come home and notice that the level in the bottles had dropped. There's another story that it was invented during Prohibition, when bartenders were trying to disguise alcoholic drinks to look like non-alcoholic drinks. That's possible. And there's a third story, was that it was invented by a man named Old Man. His nickname was Old Man Bishop in Kingsport, Tennessee. Apparently that region of Kingsport was called Long Island, that he invented this recipe in the 1920s during Prohibition and passed the recipe down to his son. The son perfected the recipe later by adding lemon and lime and wrote it down in the 1940s. Now, this is the Bishop's Long Island iced tea recipe. It is different than the other one. This one has maple syrup in it, which is a little different. And this is a picture of the granddaughter, Jamie Cyphers, and she is on a crusade to try to get the world to know that her family invented Long Island iced tea rather than the bartender on Long Island. But really, who knows? It's possible they, came up with it independently. But another thing to explore, I guess, and dig deeper. Iced tea for adults, other cocktails. If you're a person who likes to drink alcohol and wants to try putting different types of alcohol in your iced tea, you can take a sweetened iced tea and add some bourbon or whiskey or vodka. If you like a really strong liquor, you could try moonshine. You could also experiment with some different things. If you like sweet, you could try some schnapps. That's very sweet liqueur. That's not very alcoholic. some hibiscus, which is this beautiful red beverage here. I know it's called different things in other countries, carcade and sorrel and Jamaica flower, sour rose. You can take that and add some spiced rum and ginger, which is apparently a Caribbean punch recipe. I made it one time for a party, and everyone drank that, and they didn't touch any of the tea I had made that was not alcoholic. So apparently it was very tasty. So tips and tricks: if you are using iced tea to mix with alcohol, make sure that the tea is cooled, because the alcohol might evaporate if the tea is too warm. Light and clear liquors are better for mixed drinks. I had a bartender tell me that as well. And add a dash of fruit juice to add some flavor, and do some pretty garnishes, always nice. Okay, so we're going away from alcohol, and now we're going to talk about how to make a delicious iced tea. So there are four, I guess, standard methods of making it. There's the traditional or hot brew method. That is when you boil your water, heat your water, and add it to your tea hot, let it steep, and then cool it down, with some ice and water, some cold water and some ice. Then there's cold brew, which is, getting really popular around the world now, not just in select places, but cold brew is getting very popular because the bitterness, is taking away when you cold brew. You could, put it in your refrigerator and it's not going to have that bitter flavor. If you like to make sweet tea, it's probably better to do the traditional hot flavor because you want that sugar to dissolve. But, cold brew, if you want to drink unsweetened iced tea, this is probably a nice way to make it. I like to make it this way because it's easy. And ice brew, which we just learned about from that slide about Japan. And then sun tea. Now, sun tea was, I first learned about it in the 1980s, and there are still people who do it. That is when you take your tea and you fill it, fill a big pitcher, a big container of water, and then you put it in the sun outside to, steep naturally with the light of the sun. This is actually very controversial right now. I'm going to skip ahead to this and we'll go back to that other slide. It is apparently not safe to make sun tea because of the temperature. The essential problem is that sun tea will not get any hotter than 130 degrees Fahrenheit, at least here. Maybe there are some very hot countries where sun tea could get hotter than that, but it's not hot enough to kill bacteria. So that could be a problem. You could actually get really sick. If you are a person who insists on making sun tea and you've never gotten sick before, you're fine. Just keep an eye on your tea. If it looks thick or syrupy, definitely pour it out. It could be very, very bad for you. I know that here in the at least in my city and county, if you own a restaurant or a food business, it is actually illegal for you to brew sun tea and sell it commercially. For this reason, you could actually lose your food license for that. Now we're going to go back to this slide, which talks about caffeine content. There was a research study done by an agency in Taiwan, a tea research agency. They studied the caffeine content in different types of hot brew tea and then cold brewed tea as well. So they found that the cold brewed tea apparently contained lower levels of caffeine than the hot brew, which is pretty interesting. They cold brewed some green tea, and I guess they did a batch for 2 hours and another batch for 4 hours, and they found that the combined amount of caffeine for the first 3 brews was lower than the caffeine amount in a previously brewed one of their hot teas that they had brewed. So that's kind of interesting. If you're somebody who's trying to watch your caffeine content, that's good to know. Now we're skipping ahead again. Okay, here's some other tips and tricks. So obviously, you can make your own iced tea at home if you want. You can use a loose leaf tea. If you're making big quantities of tea, this might not be super practical, but you can also use tea bags. A lot of people do that because it's convenient, and there are also powdered iced teas on the market. If you're somebody who likes, to do things quickly, that's something to consider. It may not be the best quality, but it's fast. There are pre-made iced tea concentrates you can buy. I know that Oregon Chai has a concentrate they make, some of the chai companies, and they come in like a carton. And then there's the ready to drink, RTD. Now, decide what type of tea you're gonna use. You can do your black, your green, oolong, white, try them all, try different ones, see how they are iced. Or you can consider some herb tea or tisane as a base. The hibiscus is great. Tastes great cold. What's another one? Rooibos is not bad cold as well. Try different ones out. One thing you can do is you can make a concentrate. In other words, maybe make your your brewed tea very strong, like maybe make it 1/4 of the strength it's going to be at the end, and then add 3. So do 1 part of concentrated tea and then 3 parts of ice and cold water to dilute it. Now, as we mentioned before, you add your sugar when hot. Now, if you have a cold tea and you want it sweet, you can use a simple syrup. What that is, it's just basically sugar water that you make on this. You can make it on the stove, and that will dissolve a lot easier because it's already in liquid form. You can also buy simple syrup in the stores. Like here, I have found it at liquor stores here because it's used a lot in mixed alcoholic beverages, cocktails. Sometimes you can find it in your supermarket in the same aisle that has mixed drinks. And here's another tip too. You can add a pinch of baking soda, bicarbonate of soda, to keep your tea from getting cloudy. So that will, I guess, prevent it from aging quickly and preserve it a little better. One thing that I do at home is that if I'm drinking like a really nice high quality oolong or a nice green tea, you know, maybe like a Dragon Well or a Sencha or something like that, maybe I've had enough tea, I don't want to drink anymore, I will go ahead and I will make a 2nd and 3rd steeping. And then I'll just put that in my refrigerator and I will drink it cold the next day and the next day or two, because, you know, I don't want to waste that good tea by not getting multiple steeps out of it. So it's something to think about. Okay, making the perfect iced tea variations. Oh, and see, I had forgotten to mention the butterfly blue pea flower, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. A beautiful dried flower that grows in Thailand, India, Vietnam, probably some other places. It's got a very mild flavor, but it's got a striking color, makes a great hot or cold tea, and you can do a lot of fun things with it. Change the color of it with lemon or lime. So how to make a perfect iced tea. As we mentioned earlier, you can add some fresh mint. Some basil is actually really nice, gives it a great flavor. Maybe experiment with some different herbs. Add a fruit garnish. All kinds of different fruits are great as a garnish. Edible flowers. If you have access to edible flowers, those make a lovely garnish for a tea. Another thing you can do is make an infused ice cube. You can make ice cubes out of tea or out of some kind of fruit juice. Or you could take some edible flowers and put them inside of an ice cube mold, and then you'll have a beautiful edible flower ice cube floating in your cup. You can also add flavored syrups. Like if you go to a cafe, you know that they have all kinds of flavored syrups that they'll add to the coffees. You can add those to your tea as well, you know, like a mint or like a mint syrup or something like that, a fruit syrup, caramel syrup, something like that. There are also different flavored sugars on the market. I will show you some of mine when we take the slide off. You can also enjoy like an Indian masala chai. You can enjoy that iced with some milk or without milk. You can do a matcha latte and have that cold. You can have a frap in a blender, maybe with some chopped ice or even with some ice cream. You can use non-dairy alternative, oat milk or almond milk or something like that. Serve in a wine glass to make it look fancy. Here in the southern USA, we love to drink out of mason jars. It's a sort of a country kind of country farmer type of thing to enjoy. And now, do we have any questions? I love this slide. This one always makes me laugh with these 2 ladies who apparently found some sort of an herbal tea in their grandson's room that is making them giggle a lot. I wonder what that could be. If you want to stay in touch, here is my contact info. Just wanted to put that up there, theteamistress.com. Or you can contact me through the Houston Tea Festival page. And then at the end, I have a whole bunch of sources. So if anybody wants more information on where I got some of this information, I can send you this. So I'm going to click on stop sharing, I think. Can I click on that and stop sharing? So we can come back out of this slide and then I can talk to you. Can you guys see me now? Okay, I don't know if I can see the chat, but if anybody has any questions, please let me know. And I think I'm also going to hold some things up for you to see. I made some Thai iced tea, and this, I confess, I used a powdered mix that I bought at an Asian grocery. Shh, don't tell anyone. It's not nearly as good as the restaurant, but if I'm in the mood for it, it's nice and easy to make. I have this is a hibiscus tea that I made, a tisane that I made with the beautiful red hibiscus flower, and I put a garnish of a fresh peach, because that's the only fresh fruit I had in my house today. And then here's a cold brew. This is a black tea that I cold brewed in the refrigerator today. Since this morning, I'm drinking this out of a mason jar with a handle. And again, I used some peaches as a garnish. And then one thing I was going to do on camera, which I don't know if I can do it without running to the other room, but I made some ice cubes out of pink lemonade, and I was going to add some blue pea flower to it so we could watch it turn purple on camera. Maybe we'll do that in one of those little breakout session rooms that we have later. I was also going to show you, this is an iced tea bag that is a commercial iced tea bag that makes a gallon of iced tea. So I guess that's about 4 or 5 liters probably. This one is a full leaf tea, and it's in a, I think, you know, sort of a, I don't know if this is plastic or something like that. I know. And then this is one of those, this is a tea sack, I believe they're called. And these are iced tea bags. These are bags you can fill yourself at home. You can put your loose leaf tea in these bags and make your own ice. It's good if you want to make a big quantity of tea. So sometimes I'll use these if I'm making hotter iced tea for an event and I don't want the tea leaves to get everywhere. What else was I going to show you? Oh, this is something, this actually belongs to my husband, and this is a Star Wars Death Star mold for putting ice cubes in. And this is for something like, normally this would be used for whiskey or an alcoholic drink that you would not want to dilute with ice. It would keep your drink cold, but you could drink your whiskey or your scotch without having it dilute. But this would be a lot of fun, I think, for a nice iced tea to maybe put like an edible flower, some kind of a fruit in here maybe, and then put, you know, have that big round ice cube in your drink. I think that would be a lot of fun for your iced tea. Flavored sugars, I have some different ones that are fun. This one is a lemon sugar. I have a peach sugar, so if you want to add some flavor to your tea. I know that in the tea industry, there's a you know, sort of a, I don't want to use the word snob, but there's I guess the people who are real tea purists who don't like any kind of flavored teas, and that's totally great. There's nothing better than just like a plain high quality tea that you're drinking over ice. But you can also look at the flavors as being like a seasoning for your food. You know, you don't really eat food without adding some kind of salt or spice to it or something like that. So play around with these different flavorings, play around with the syrups, the grenadine, you know, maybe some orange flower water, rose water, try some different things like that and have some fun with it, you know. Pretend you're trying out different seasonings on a piece of, you know, meat or vegetable or something like that. So what time is it? Okay, it's 10:46. I talked really fast because I was worried we wouldn't have enough time, but maybe, I don't know if people are chatting or if Sue is going to come back on in a minute and ask me questions. I don't know. I guess I'll just stay here and say hi to everyone and see what happens next. Did I forget anything? Oh, here she comes.
Going. Hi.
Hi, how are
Thank
you?
you so much for all the information and interesting facts and recipes.
Thank
and
you.
your
I really
entertainment.
Should we watch what happens if we add the blue pea flower to the pink ice cubes? I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, let me go get them. You talk to everybody and I'll be right back.
Okay. Donna says, do you have a vlog? I think Amanda should have a vlog. Vlog. It'll be fun to follow her.
So these
Amanda, do you do vlog?
Oh, this got all steamy it was in the freezer because I wanted to make sure the ice didn't melt, but okay.
What's in it?
These are, so all I was going to run out and go to the store today, but because we're having this hurricane warning, I didn't leave the house. So this is a strawberry lemonade, a commercial strawberry lemonade that I bought, and I froze it in an ice cube tray. So I know that when you add the pea flower to lemon or lime, it will turn purple instead of blue. So here we have the blue. And I don't know what's going to happen with the strawberry, if that's going to change it, but let's find out. I don't even know if you can see this. Oh, wow. Okay, it turned purple the minute it hit the tea. The minute it hit the purple. It turns purple from the pink ice cubes. And that's going to give it a nice flavor once the ice cubes start to melt too. It's going to have a strawberry lemon flavor.
Do you find the butterfly pea flower tasted different? Depends on which butterfly pea flower you got, because sometimes I find the definition as earthy. Do you think it's earthy?
That's interesting. I have always ordered mine from the same supplier, so I don't know where they get it. I mean, I know what country they get it from, but to me, it tastes like, I tell people that it tastes like chamomile. And also, it reminds me of chamomile, depending where you're from. And I noticed that also if you boil green peas in water and then you drink the water that the peas were boiled in, it tastes like that to me also, like vegetable water. So I've never really noticed it tasting earthy, but I guess now that you mentioned it, yeah, I think the flavor it's kind of mild. I think that's one reason people like to add stuff to it,
Yeah, I think with the ice cube, it will taste much better. But
I think so.
Yeah.
This is actually a blend. This is not pure pea flour. This is a blend that I have that has some lemongrass in it and some coconut flavor and stuff. So.
Oh, yum.
I was starting to get good because the ice is melting.
Steph says, so glad I stay up to watch your presentation. And we also have questions.
Have you been up all night? I did something to my screen where I can no longer see the chat. I don't know, are people asking anything or? I don't know.
Someone asked whether you do vlog. Do you do YouTube?
Do I do YouTube? So I have a YouTube channel I set up and I haven't done anything in it except put up a video of my dog and cat. So I do want to start doing that. It's on my list of things to do. So I'm going to take that as a compliment. Thank you.
Yes.
Or maybe they just want to throw me on YouTube and say, hey, crazy lady, stop YouTubing. I don't know.
And Dennis also asked to the audience, but I think you could also answer. Can someone describe how sun tea tasted comparing to other way of brewing?
That's a good question. I have not had sun tea in probably 30 or 40 years. So I can't answer that. Because as soon as I think for you, I stopped drinking it. That's a good question, though.
Let me see whether... I think that was pretty much it. Does anyone have questions? I have a question. What made you interested in iced tea? Because you are also organizing festival that's related to iced tea, right?
Yeah, I had actually been wanting to do a tea festival for years. And by the time I got organized to do one, I had kind of missed I think here it gets hot very fast. So we have a very small window of time to have a tea festival that focuses on hot tea. So by the time I got my act together, it was already like May. And I thought, why don't I do an iced tea festival? Because that's kind of a, it's, a Southern thing. And I thought it would be fun to, just because of what time of year it was, I thought it would be a fun thing to do a festival that just focused on iced tea. So I did 2 of those. And then we did two that were called Lone Star, which is the nickname of Texas, the Lone Star Iced Tea Festival. And then we did 2 that were called Houston Tea Festival that were in January, February, which is our winter. I know it's the opposite in Australia and you're in winter right now. So
yes.
So you have a jacket on. I'm like sweating here. Cold tea. Yeah, it's hot. So my interest, it's not really, normally I drink hot tea. Even in the summer, I drink hot tea. My husband and his family, they drink cold tea all the time. Like for me, now I made a lot of it for today's talks. I'll be drinking it for the next few days. But
thank you so much for having all the samples. It was very nice to see all of the actual tea.
And that was your suggestion, by the way. I know you suggested that, so I did that for you because and it was a good
Thank you.
For people to have a little visual, right? But
yeah, it was fun to watch it.
So I had actually hired a speaker for my first iced tea festival to talk about, the origins of iced tea. And she was a Victorian expert. And she did this whole story about the 1904 World's Fair. And I did a little digging afterwards. And this is not to shame anyone or anything like that, but it got me interested in the topic. And when I started reading more, I kind of learned this whole backstory that, the main story is not necessarily the true story, which I think this is just maybe a metaphor for life. Like, don't, always think for yourself. Don't take things at face value, right? Do research, right? I don't know. 2 sides to every story.
It's nice that you also research and then share the information. Frederick asked, will you make your presentation available online?
I did a similar talk to this one on June 10th for National Iced Tea Day, and I actually have a recording of that I recorded on Zoom. So I could share that link, or I guess if you can tell me how I would do that through should we share them through this website, the festival site, or is there another way?
Yeah, you can. Or if anyone's really interested in, click Amanda's circle, and then you can also message Amanda personally.
Oh,
that
they
you
can
want
send
it.
messages through Hopin. Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah. Or you can also share your own link if there's link that you can share.
Okay, here's my t-shirt, theteamistress.com. You can, find me there and message my phone number, my email address. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. So
perfect. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
And we have Adeline's tea parties coming up. So anyone's interested, you can go into this session, click the session tab, and Adeline's tea party will start from 2.
Do I go to the sessions too or not?
Oh, you can go to the sessions too. If anyone's also want to follow with Amanda also has her room in the session, and you can follow with her and then continue the conversation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.